Before we get started here, I just want to thank JFF, Maria Flynn, Lucretia Murphy, Kathy Manis, for all of the wonderful work they've done dedicated to justice, workforce, and education. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to be here in front of this wonderful crowd and all of these wonderful people to have a conversation with someone who's become a dear friend of mine, Mr. Larry Miller from Nike, who is responsible for skyrocketing and amplifying the Jordan brand in the late 90s and early 2000s, someone who's been justice impacted himself, like myself, also former president of the Portland Trail Blazers, and just a remarkable story about the power of possibility when people are given access. So welcome, Larry.
Thank you, Ken, and thanks for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to come here and share some words and thoughts with an amazing group here. It's a lot of people.
Appreciate it. So in January of this year, Larry wrote a book called From the Streets to the Boardroom. And I've had the pleasure and privilege of having several conversations with Larry about his work and his trajectory, and we couldn't possibly unpack it in the time frame that we have today. So what we're really going to talk about is his transformation while he was serving time in a Philadelphia prison, and how he used an AA degree, community college program there, to catapult himself to a BA degree at Temple University in accounting, of all things, right? And I said, Larry, you don't see a lot of cats coming out of prison that get a degree in accounting. He graduated at the top of his class. And I want Larry to talk a little bit about how the book came to be and what happened after he made that remarkable transformation in prison, A, about a program that he was involved with, and then B, what happened with Arthur Andersen. So talk a little bit about your transformation, Larry, and what happened.
Well, I'll start with, you said how the book came to be, and it was really my oldest daughter who pushed me, saying, Dad, you have a story that can motivate and inspire people. You need to share it. And reluctantly, I agreed to do that because for 40 years, I hid my background. I hid the things I had in my past because I was afraid that it would negatively impact the career that I was building. But to Ken's point, when I was incarcerated the last time in Pennsylvania, I was at a prison called Graterford in Pennsylvania, and there was a program in place there when I got there that you could take classes inside the jail, and there were a number of colleges that were offering classes inside Montgomery County Community College, Philadelphia Community College, Temple University, LaSalle, Villanova, all were offering classes inside the jail. And then the way this program was structured, you had to take a certain number of classes inside the jail and have to have half of your minimum sentence in, no write-ups, no trouble, and then you could qualify to move into this program where there were trailers outside the jail wall, and you actually lived in those trailers and could leave every day and go to school and just have to be back to the trailers by 8 o'clock at night. And when I first heard about that program, I was like, that's how I want to do my time. I mean, if I got to do time, I'd rather do it like that. And that was what motivated me initially to get into that program. But once I got into it, I started taking the classes inside, moved out into the trailers, started at going to Montgomery County Community College every day from the trailers, and eventually I really started to believe that I could change my life. And I think that is one of the keys to really getting people to be able to move on and do better things in their life. They have to believe it. And it started with me actually believing that I could change my life and that I could do something different with my life. And it was that program that really fostered that belief for me. The problem is that program doesn't exist anymore. In the late 90s, that was one of the programs that was done away with in the state of Pennsylvania. And so, the way I look at it, if I was there today, I couldn't do what I've done. I couldn't come out and make the kind of contribution that I've been able to make just because I wouldn't have that opportunity. So that was really what really provided the opportunity for me to change my life and be able to do the things that I've been able to do.
I appreciate that, Larry. That's really an amazing story about the college program and what gave people access like you and other people that were there, and how those programs over time, through policies of mass incarceration, slowly dwindled down to where there's very little programming and educational opportunities, specifically vocational opportunities that can transfer into market-driven skill sets for people, and that's something that we need more of. One of the things that struck me the most the first time I talked to you was the denial of access. And it's when you graduated from Temple, you were at the top of the class. I remember you telling me that Arthur Andersen, and we're dating ourselves here, the Big 8 accounting firms used to go on the university campuses and recruit. And when the managing hiring manager came and was going to offer you a job, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what happened during that time.
I was about to graduate with a degree in accounting, and back then it was what was the Big 8 accounting firms. And the goal was if you graduate with an accounting degree that you get hired by one of the Big 8. And Arthur Andersen was one of the Big 8 accounting firms, and they were kind of the one that I had zeroed in on and thought, like, hey, this is the one that I want to work for. And so I went, interviewed, spent the whole day there interviewing with a number of people. And throughout the course of the day, I kept thinking, like, should I share my background? Should I share my past with these folks? And all day I was thinking about it, thinking. Finally, I got to the last person of the day. He was the hiring manager. And I decided that I was going to share my background with him. So I sit down in the chair, I start to talk to him, and I could see as I'm telling him, I could see his face changing. And I was like, okay, this is not going how I hoped it was going to go. But I finished telling my story, and he said, wow, that's an amazing story, and I'm sure you're going to do really well. And he reached in his pocket and pulled out an envelope, and he said, I had an offer here all ready to give you, but I can't give it to you now. I can't take a chance on something else. He said, I'm sure you'll do fine, but I can't take that chance. And so at that point, that's when I decided that I was not going to share my story with anyone. I wasn't going to deny it. I wasn't going to lie if asked, but I was not going to share it. My first job out of school was for Campbell Soup Company as an accountant working for Campbell Soup Company. And the question on the application said, have you been convicted of a crime in the last 5 years? And the answer was no, it had been longer than 5 years. So I was able to answer that question truthfully. And going forward, really, I never kind of got that question again, or if I did, it was a time-limited question. But that was really what made me decide that I was not going to share this. And for 40 years, I kept this secret as I built my career.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I want to double click on that, Larry, because Arthur Andersen, it ended up turning out very well for you and it ended up being their loss. But hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of people who have suffered some type of criminal conviction face that type of scarlet letter and that type of reaction from companies every single day. And one of the things I'm most proud about in the work that I'm doing with Lucretia at JFF is that we're really on a mission to evangelize fair chance hiring and opportunity workers, people who have suffered from criminal convictions, because the contribution that you ended up making, and this is why I say about the power of possibility and potential, was you ended up taking a brand, and I just want to jump to that real quick because we're short on time. Talk a little bit about what happened when Phil Knight from Nike, because his trajectory ended up going to Nike, and I don't want to give it all away because it's in the book and we'll be giving away a lot of books downstairs at the break. What happened when Jordan was getting ready to retire? Phil comes to you and wants you to run the Jordan brand.
Well, when Michael Jordan was about to retire from the Bulls for the last time, they did that more than once, right? There was a lot of concern both inside of Nike and with a lot of our customers that it was over, because the formula was we create this really cool shoe, we do some advertising with Bugs Bunny or Spike Lee or someone, and then Michael Jordan wears that shoe 82 games and into the playoffs. That was the formula to sell product. And now Michael Jordan's not going to be playing anymore, and we chose that time to say, okay, we're going to now create a brand around him, which didn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people. But for us, we believe that that logo had enough power that we could actually create a brand around that power, around that logo. And when we first started with the Jordan business, it was about $140, $150 million. And this year it's going to be $5 billion business. So we did something pretty right. We did okay. We did okay.
Yeah, I think it's important about Larry. He's understating his contribution, because at the time, Phil Knight and Nike, Jordan was retiring. They thought the brand was going to go down like Dr. J's brand went down in the 80s with Converse. And they gave basically it to Larry. And the reason this story is so impressive to me is because it really epitomizes the importance of DE&I and the value of lived experience at the business case and corporate level. Larry was able to take a brand that was doing $150 million a year, and because of his lived experience in the streets of West Philadelphia, born and raised, right? No slapping on this stage, though. He,
No, you won't slap everybody right here.
he was able to take a brand and based on his lived experience as an African American male in this country and understand the perspective of what somebody like Michael Jordan meant to the black community, to the youth and everything, and took that knowledge and that perspective and that value proposition that he owned as his own and take it to a $5 billion brand. And so this is, if Larry's not the case for why every CEO and C-suite should be expanding how they look at C-suite potential and possibility, Larry's the case, because what he's been able to do at Nike and then what he was able to do, and he hasn't told this story yet, about how he became the president of the Portland Trail Blazers. I'd like for you to talk just a little bit about that because it's important.
Well, when I went to a game one night and they had an area where you could go and eat before the game, and a couple friends of mine were there, and the Blazers had just not re-signed the president of the team, and so we were sitting there talking, and one of my friends said, "Man, you should throw your name in for that." I was like, "I don't know anything about running an NBA team." "No, you should." So long story short, I ended up meeting with the guy who was hiring, and then meeting with Paul Allen, who was the owner a number of times, and they made me an offer that it was difficult. It was a difficult decision for me because Nike made a counteroffer that I could have, I couldn't have asked for anything more. But because I felt like the trailblazer role would put me in a position where people that look like me could see someone who looks like them in a job like that. And that was really the motivating factor for me taking the job with the Portland Trail Blazers. And I was there for 5 years. It was a great run. We had the #1 pick in the draft. We didn't take Kevin Durant. We took Greg Oden, who was a phenomenal player, but just got injured and never really materialized to, but the rap is we could have taken Kevin Durant.
But you ended up taking Damian Lillard, so that kind of
Well,
made
my
up for
last
those
draft
of us who know
there
about
was
basketball.
Damian Lillard, so that kind of made up for the
Yeah.
Greg Oden.
So there's a couple things I want us to think about in the audience. I already mentioned the DEI thing, but I also want to just double down on the importance of education and what happens when you apply yourself, when you're given an opportunity and you're given a forum to do and fulfill your potential. I oftentimes have these conversations across the country and talk about how we're typically limited to one sandbox, and that when we're given opportunity to play in different sandboxes and other doors open up to us, usually we thrive.
Exactly.
The real question is access, and so educational programs, the president reinstituted the Pell Grant program in prison, which is great, but really talking about micro certifications and things that don't require AA and college degrees. One of the things we're doing at Checker is creating Checker University, which is going to be a tech platform that offers these micro certification programs to justice impacted people, and then pairing them with employers in Silicon Valley and other places across the country. It's very, very, very important to think about access. And Larry Miller, who is my mentor and a great friend of mine, is the case study for why this is important. Because I don't know anybody else who took a 10-year, two 5-year, but it ended up being 10 years in prison, and turned that into the success and exploited the potential that he had and created this wonderful trajectory of a life. And now he's written this book to go and talk to people. We're in the process of talking about creating an ecosystem of companies that can provide people coming home from prison and other justice impacted people opportunities to get into some of the major companies in the country through fellowship programs, apprenticeship programs, et cetera. So, I want to thank you for, what you've done.
Well, it's, thank you. Well, I really appreciate that. And, the purpose for me doing this, because, I could have just kept doing what I was doing and never told this story. But to me, it was to hopefully motivate and inspire some folks who are in a similar situation to mine to be able to realize that they can change their life. But it was also for folks like the people in this room to realize and understand that, people do deserve another chance, and that there's a lot of talent. Ken and I talk about this all the time. Some of the most intelligent, creative, brilliant minds I've ever met, I met while I was in the penitentiary. And to me, how do we tap into that power that, that's there? And something like 95% of people who are incarcerated eventually get out. The goal should be that they come out better people than they were when they went in. And that's not going to happen unless there are programs and there are things and there are people that are supporting and helping that effort. And so to me, that was one of the main goals and one of the main purposes for telling this story and sharing this, is that hopefully, it would change people's perspective of formerly incarcerated people and have them willing to give people an opportunity and to tap into some of that talent and intelligence and creativity that exists inside of the prisons.
Yeah, that's true, Larry. I appreciate you giving that insight, because it's important. I mean, I know that there's some people in the audience who understand a little bit about the criminal justice system, and maybe a lot about the criminal justice system. But in this country, we've created a system that is really a second life sentence for people who have suffered a conviction. And it's a scarlet letter that people wear every single day for the rest of their lives. And so it begs the question about how long, once a person is released, are they formerly incarcerated? Are they an ex-con, or whatever it is that people want to label us? I think it's important that we move on and provide that type of perspective and opportunity for everyone to pick themselves back up, reset, rebuild, and become a contributing member to society. Now, for Larry, it was very different. He had to hold a secret for 40 years. It wasn't good for his mental health. It wasn't good for a lot of things, because as he rose through the ranks and became more and more successful, it became more and more of a burden to carry something that was really inauthentic in reference to his background. And fortunately for me, I haven't had to do that. I was able to come out and work for a public interest law firm, and it was actually something that we talked about on a regular basis, to be upfront and transparent about it. But the timing is different for people. And a lot of people walk around with the shame. They're uncomfortable talking about it, not because they don't want to talk about it, because the people who are going to receive the information are going to be uncomfortable talking about it. And at Checker, we've initiated a program where 6% of our workforce, over 75 people, are formerly incarcerated. And we advance a culture where social justice is talked about, criminal justice is talked about, women being incarcerated is talked about. And it's really embedded into the culture to talk about giving people second chances and creating a future of work that's really fair for everybody. So we're going to talk a little bit about this on a panel, and I want everybody to give Larry a big applause.
Thank you.
Not only for his personal transformation and success, but what he means to a community of 20 million people in this country who have some type of felony conviction on their record and have trouble navigating workforce, have trouble navigating upskilling and reskilling, and then placing themselves in position at companies where they can be comfortable and safe, just working every day and rebuilding their lives and their families and their communities. So thanks again, Larry. One last applause.
Thank you.